Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this third session of the third day. We are really grateful to Professor Rajkumar Pant, who has agreed to deliver a lecture on this FDP on computational techniques in engineering. To moderate this session, I'd like to invite my colleague, Dr. Samira, to moderate this session. Over to you, Dr. Samira, for this session.
I welcome you all for this last session of third day.
Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Imran. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I welcome you all in this Atal AICT Faculty Development Program on computational techniques in engineering. I feel elevated and fortunate to introduce today's esteemed speaker, Professor Rajkumar S. Pant. Professor Rajkumar S. Pant has bachelor's and master's and PhD degree in aerospace engineering. His areas of specialization include aircraft conceptual design, air transportation, and optimization. He has been a member of Faculty of Aerospace Engineering Department at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, since December 1989. He has also worked for 5 years in the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited in the Design and Engineering Department at Kanpur and Nasik divisions for 3.5 years and 1.5 years, respectively. Professor Pant is an alumnus of College of Aeronautics, Cranfield University, UK, where he earned his PhD degree under Commonwealth Scholarship Scheme, and IIT Madras, where he did his master's in aeronautical engineering. In 2002, he has set up a lighter-than-air system laboratory at IIT Bombay, which has undertaken several R&D and consultancy projects related to design, development, and demonstration of LTA system. Since 2007, he has been an international member of AIAA, Lighter Than Air Technical Committee, and was the chairperson for 2014 till 2016. He has published and presented more than 235 scientific papers, of which more than 180 are in international journals and conferences. He has also visited several top-ranking institutes and universities all over the world. Professor Pant was a visiting faculty at the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore in 2016, and Department of Aerospace and Ocean Engineering at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University in 2010-2011. He was a visiting researcher at Instituto Tecnológico de Aeronáutica, Brazil in 2012. Texas A&M University in 2011, Cambridge University in 2008, and Imperial College London in 2006. In 2012, he was appointed as special visiting researcher under the Science Without Border program, which Science with Border program of the Brazilian government for a 3-year project which related to design and development of hybrid lighter-than-air systems. Professor Pant was honored with D.P. Joshi Excellent Teacher Award in 2014 in recognition of his merit, achievement, enthusiasm for teaching, and making a lasting impression on students. In 2019, He was facilitated by Institution of Engineers India as an eminent engineering personality in aerospace engineering. Due to time constraint, I have to stop here, though the enthusiasm and achievement of Professor Pant is unstoppable. Now I invite Professor Pant to please open the session. Over to Professor Pant. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and thank you so much for your introduction. I just wanted to get a confirmation that my slide is visible because I've already shared it.
Yes, sir, your sides are visible.
Okay, right. A very warm welcome to all the participants. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some research work that has been done in association with my past and present PhD students as well as some master students on a topic that is of very much importance and relevance to all designers who are going to use any numerical techniques such as the computational fluid dynamics or CFD when they do the design optimization. So this is going to be the content of today's interaction with you. Since the work I'm going to discuss with you is related to what are called as lighter than air or LTS systems, I am going to spend some time introducing to you about these systems so that you get a relevant background of the problem. Then I'm going to talk to you about what are the surrogate modeling techniques which are commonly used and what are the nuances of SBDO, surrogate based design optimization. And then I'm going to reinforce whatever I discuss with you by giving you 3 examples through case studies. The first one is done by a master student and the last 2 are done by PhD students. So just a few days ago, I was invited by the Los Angeles and Las Vegas section of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics to give a talk on lighter than air systems. So I have just chosen the same presentation, but I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'm going to quickly go through. So the question that many people have is, what are lighter than air systems? Basically, any system in which the principal lifting force is buoyancy, that system can be classified as a lighter than air system. Buoyancy is something about which we have studied right from our school days, a tendency of a fluid, a body to float in a fluid when it is submerged. Okay. Archimedes discovered buoyancy, and this is how he discovered buoyancy. Okay, we all know the story. Lighter than air systems consist basically of balloon type system which are filled with LTA gases. Any gas or mixture whose density is less than air can be considered to be an LTA gas. The 2 most common ones are hydrogen and helium in the order of their lifting capacity. Hydrogen, as you know, is the lightest element, lightest gas known to man, and it is easily available and not at all expensive. However, the main problem with this is that it is highly inflammable, and that's why there is a lot of worry associated with using hydrogen as a lifting gas. The next best gas available to humankind is helium, which is slightly off compared to hydrogen in lifting capacity, but it is not easily available, and also it is horrendously expensive, and that is its main limitation. But other than these 2, actually any other gas or a mixture of gases can be considered to be LTA gas. The list is actually very exhaustive, but what I've shown here are few of the important gases which can be used as an LTA gas. However, as we go down this particular list, you will realize that the lifting capacity in kilograms per meter cube is reducing. So much so that if you look at carbon monoxide, you will get only around 60 grams of lift per meter cube of the gas. And that's why it's of very little or no practical use for any LTS system. So therefore, most of the LTS systems use hydrogen or helium. Now, the first man-made LTS system was many years ago in September 1783, made up of paper by 2 brothers. Now, most of you have some idea, or you have seen or heard about the conventional aircraft like the aircraft, planes, helicopters, they all come under what is called as heavier than air system, a system which will be attracted towards the ground by gravity if you leave it. That is a heavier than air system. There are 3 reds and 2 greens. The 3 reds are the drawbacks and the 2 greens are the advantages. So these systems are very fast and they are less susceptible to weather changes, and that's why they are so popular and so very well known. Despite the fact that they are fuel inefficient, they are quite complex to fabricate and design, and also they do not have any aerostatic lift. So to fly and to overcome gravity, they need to operate at certain minimum speed. On the other hand, the lighter than air systems or the LTS systems, they have 3 greens and 2 reds. The 3 greens are that apart from the dynamic lift which comes when it starts moving because of relative motion, even when it is stationary, it has aerostatic lift due to buoyancy, because of which the fuel efficiency is very high. In fact, if you want to remain up in the air for a long time, you actually consume 0 fuel, because the aerostatic lift might be enough to give you the required upward force to overcome the weight, and also they are less complex compared to the aircraft. But they suffer from 2 major drawbacks. One is because of their bulky size, they are very slow, and also they are more susceptible to weather changes. So they are not all weather vehicles. They can be used only when the weather is supportive. And that these 2 red are the main reasons why we don't see LTS systems today so popular, because they are these 2 major drawbacks are going to create a serious problem. However, because of the increased outlook towards fuel efficiency and green aviation, a lot of people are now looking at LTS systems with a new light. The 3 basic conventional LTS systems are shown here. The first on the extreme right is the hot air balloon, which is nothing but a balloon that is filled with hot air by heating the air below using an heating system. It has only got 1 degree of freedom, which is that you can make it go up and down by controlling the buoyancy, but it has got no directional control. So therefore, it is completely at the mercy of the ambient wind, due to which, apart from excitement, adventure, and maybe publicity, it is of no use. So therefore, today we will not talk about hot air balloon. For scientific applications, the 2 major systems which can be considered as worthy are the aerostat, which is in the center. So in an aerostat, you have an envelope which is filled with the LTA gas. In this case, we also have some fins which are meant for stabilizing the platform, and you have a cable which is attached to the ground on a ground control station, and because of that it remains stationary at one place, and that's why the name is aerostat. On the extreme left is airship, which is like an aircraft, because not only does it have an engine to give it some thrust to overcome the winds, but also there are directional control systems which allow it to fly in the desired trajectory. So today we will look only about airships and aerostats, the 2 major LTS systems. And what I will do is I quickly start with the aerostats and give you an overview, and then I'll move to airships. So aerostats, as I mentioned to you, are stationary balloons which are generally considered to be aerial platforms. The picture that you are seeing is of an aerostat that was launched at NIT Hamirpur in the year 2014. We did this demonstration in their campus. And on the right, you see an airship, which is a system that was demonstrated in a flying condition, free of any attachment. It was flown in Manali in 2009. So moving on to aerostats, basically aerostats can be considered to be an aerodynamically shaped tethered LTA platform on which you mount a payload that you want to carry up. Usually we use communication equipment and surveillance equipment. The desired features of a good aerostat is that for a given volume, it should be able to carry high payload. That means its self-weight should be quite low. It should maintain specified altitude so that the payload can remain at that altitude for a long time. And when the wind direction changes and when the winds also change in magnitude, it should be fairly stable so that it doesn't move very rapidly. All of these features are affected by the envelope shape. Remember this, my friends, because I'm going to talk today about envelope shape optimization, both for aerostats and for airships. Okay, here is an example of a portable aerostat system mounted on the pickup truck. And the black colored thing that you see on the top is a place where you can mount any camera or any other payload, a communication system, etc. And this can be used then for providing an aerial platform. If you look at an aerostat parts, the main component is the envelope, which is generally called as a helium or hydrogen chamber. Inside that, you have an air balloon, which is basically an air bag inside the gas bag for providing pressure and buoyancy control. Then there are tail fins which give you stability. There is a tether which is connected from the balloon to the ground, and this is basically to hold the balloon so that it doesn't fly away. Payload can be anything that you want, and on the ground you need a system for winching and mooring of the system. By winching I mean allowing it to go up and down, and by mooring I mean holding it when it is not to be deployed, either because of bad weather or because you are working on the payload, etc. So as I said, aerostat is basically a platform. Why should we use aerostats when we already have aircraft? So once again, aircraft have those two good features which I mentioned to you. Everything else is bad. They require a runway type location to operate in most cases. An aerostat, on the other hand, has very good facilities, except it needs only good weather and it remains stationary. The picture on the bottom left shows an aerostat which is in the moored condition on the ground. And when you release it, it can go up and remain as an aerial airborne platform, which can stay aloft for a long time, of the order of 1 month non-stop in a commercial aerostat system. Many people say that there are satellites available for surveillance, so why do we need aerostats? Friends, it's because of the cost effectiveness, because of the relocatability, because of the portability, and also since they are nearer to the ground, they can provide much greater detail as compared to the satellites. And satellites, once launched, you cannot refurbish them because they are gone in space. It's very expensive to locate a satellite and to refurbish it. Aerostats, on the other hand, because they can be easily brought down, you can reconfigure the payload as and when needed. Aerostats can be used at very high altitudes with very large payloads like radars, etc. And they can give a large amount of coverage. You can also mount them on ships in the sea so that you can use them for surveillance in the nearby areas. Okay. So applications of aerostats are quite a few. I'll just list through a few of them, but don't worry about it. This is an aerostat that was developed by our laboratory for the government of Uttarakhand, an agency called as the IT Development Agency, ITDA, and that was used basically for communication purposes. Okay. So this is a system which was field tested in the grounds of ITDA in 2018, and towards the end, if we have time and if somebody is interested, I could show you a video of this system. It's a day and night system because we deployed it non-stop for about a week's time without the need to bring it down, except when we want to install some other equipment to test it. Okay, and we did a trial for communication purposes, for post-disaster communication. We could establish 2G, 3G, 4G data and voice connectivity, and of the radius of around 2 kilometers. And then we were also able to provide Wi-Fi within 1 kilometer radius. And with the police wireless system, we could go to 60 kilometers. So that's all I wanted to talk about aerostats. I would like to know from the organizers if you want to take questions right now or do you want to take questions later? What is the preferred mode? Because sometimes people may actually not remember their question till the end. So my suggestion is to make it interactive. If anybody has any questions about aerostats, we can take a few questions right now. And then we can move to airships and after that to the main topic.
So there is a question on what parameters this deployment duration depends.
The deployment duration of an aerostat depends on the permeability of the envelope. So if the envelope material is very good and it does not leak gas at a high rate, you can have a very long duration permeability. That is the main reason, the main factor that determines the duration of deployment.
Okay, sir, we don't have any more questions now. You can please continue.
Okay, thanks a lot. Moving on to airships, which are much more exciting and much more interesting. So airships are, as I mentioned, are like aircraft because
I think we have lost our resource person. We'll try to reconnect him. Just bear with us. Professor Pant, can you hear me? I think we have lost you, sir. We can't hear you. I think we have lost Professor Pant. I'm sure he must be trying to reconnect with us. We have to wait for a few moments. Thank you. Dear participants, I have just received a message from Professor Pant. He's trying to fix his internet connectivity and he will be back with us very soon. Thank you.
Hello, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, sir, we can hear you now.
Actually, I was unmuted. I was muted and I could not unmute myself. But now I'm back.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to share my presentation once again. Sorry for this.
Sure, sir.
Really sorry for this. Okay, so we are back now, right? I hope you can see.
Yes, sir, we can see the slides. Thank you very much.
So what I'll do is I'll just go full screen and go to the. We were looking at airships, correct? So just want a confirmation that the screen is visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay.
Yep.
So like every aircraft, there are only 4 forces acting on the aerostat, as seen here. Now, if you want to, basically, the drag force comes in when you start moving. So to do that, to fight that, you need to create thrust force. And the weight force is overcome by lift, but lift in LTE systems is mostly available by buoyancy. So therefore, if you want to have larger lift, buoyant lift LB, then you have only 2 options. One is you can increase the volume of the envelope, or you can increase the difference in the density between the ambient air outside and the gas inside. Okay. So like an aircraft, we have components of an airship. The big envelope which is filled with the gas is called as the envelope or the hull. And then on the bottom, you have a gondola in which you put your payload and your engine and all those things. And then you have the control surfaces. Structurally speaking, there are 4 kinds of airships, but I'm not going to go into the details now. And whenever we talk about airships, many people talk about Hindenburg. They say that, oh, there was an airship called Hindenburg which caught fire and so many people were killed. But they don't remember, or they don't know that more than the number of people who died, 13 passengers and 22 crew members, there were 62 people who actually survived. Okay, so that is something that many people don't know about airships. So this is how airships were revived in mid-80s. And I'd like to just show you a short video of how airships are operating today. This is an airship which is operating in Japan. You can notice that there is a mass truck which is now detached and it is moving away. Look at the number of people on the ground. There are only 3 or 4 people, only 4 people on the ground. And this airship is operating from a ground near a public highway without disturbing any other transportation system. It can operate from open grounds. And when there is a time for it to lift off, when you obtain the clearance from the ground crew, you just have to tilt the engines and the aircraft, it can just lift up vertically. So by default, most airships are vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, especially when you can have tilting of the engines as shown in this case. And once you reach a reasonable altitude, you can just tilt the motors forward and then you can fly like a normal aircraft. The only difference is that they are slow flying vehicles. So you will not see them flying more than about 90 to 100 kilometers per hour. That is the maximum speed at which airships can be flown in still air. Okay, but you can see that it's a pure vertical takeoff and landing system, and a very, very smooth and benign system with not much jerk and vibrations. There are many USPs of airships. Some of them are listed here in the order of their importance and prominence. And these are the applications of airships all over the world. So one of the most common things is to fly an airship with the name of a company to popularize a product. As you can see in this particular slide, you can use it for aerial sightseeing. This is Las Vegas by air. You can use it for tourism purposes. You can use it for sports tracking. You can use it for corporate hospitality. But there are also many interesting applications where you can use it for noble initiatives like locating of the mines in a post-war scenario. This particular example was funded by the United Nations, and it was an airship that was used for anti-mining operations in the Kosovo conflict. Right now, Olympic Games are going on. Airships have been very popular all over the world for aerial surveillance during Olympics. Okay, and I want to quickly showcase to you some work done by our researchers in IIT Bombay in our lab. The first airship that we flew was the micro airship in the year 2002, which was designed by students and some research engineers in our laboratory. This airship was able to fly with a payload of only about 1 kilogram, but it was flown in our Gymkhana ground in IIT Bombay. And you can see that the vehicle is a very slow moving vehicle, easy to visualize, and it makes a lot of news. You can see how much controllability we have on the vehicle. Even though it's our first flight, we were able to do. Now, subsequently, we took this larger version of this airship and did some testing in Pune, because we were invited by the government to demonstrate the technology at the Indian Science Congress in the year 2003. So we flew this particular airship in the gliding center in Pune, in Hadapsar. And after testing it, we then took it with us to the Indian Science Congress in Bengaluru in 2003. Subsequently, we have worked on several sponsored projects and research projects for airships. And the one that you see flying behind me in the photograph and also the screen now is an airship that was created for the DRDO, which you can see is remotely controlled, and it is basically meant for a demonstration of this platform as suitable for snow cover evaluation by the DRDO scientists who do imaging of avalanches and other snow patterns in the lower Himalayas. Okay, so this airship was flown with remote control at a radius of around 2 kilometers, and on board we had fitted a camera which was taking still images, and the images were then transmitted to the ground onto a device. The main purpose was, as I mentioned, snow cover evaluation. Therefore, the DRDO scientists were interested in high quality images and not video. Okay, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to just go ahead now and skip this and come back to our problem. So now, as you know, when we design LTS systems, the shape of the envelope is very important. So whenever we do any optimization, one of the approaches which is very common nowadays is called as surrogate-based optimization. So let's understand the background of surrogates. Surrogate basically is a substitute or a replacement. Okay. And the origin of this word comes from early Latin 17th century, where electing as a substitute is called as surrogatus, which is the past principle of surrogare. That's how the word has come. So what is meant by surrogate-based design? Any complex system, if we have to design that system, for example, in an airship, if I want to do the shape optimization of the envelope, I need to go for high fidelity, expensive analysis. The analysis could be CFD analysis for aerodynamic parameters, or it could be FEM analysis for structural parameters, or it could be some other analysis for carrying out the flight trajectory simulation, etc. Whatever the case may be, in our case, we wanted to do shape optimization. So in shape optimization, our job was that there is a baseline design to start with. You perturb that design and send it to a CFD solver. You evaluate the gradients and then send the whole information to an optimizer. The optimizer will check if the optimization criteria has been met. If it is met, it will stop. Otherwise, it will modify the design. Then again, you must do CFD evaluation for that design. Again, evaluate the gradients and supply it to the optimizer. This cycle keeps on going till you feel that you have obtained the optimum design. The problem is that in each design iteration, we need to invoke a CFD solver. And for those of you who have worked on CFD, you will realize that each evaluation on a CFD solver takes some finite time. In our case, we were doing a simple 2D analysis, but still it took around 20-25 minutes per solution. And if the optimizer is going to ask you to do, let us say, 100 or 200 evaluations, or maybe 2,000, 3,000 evaluations, then you have to invoke the CFD solver 2,000 times, which is very, very time consuming. So the solution to this problem is to use surrogate-based design. So optimization is time and computation intensive. So what you do is you create a model of a model called as a surrogate model or a meta model, which is a black box. So by solving the black box several times, by giving it some design variable set X and calculating F, you can build a surrogate, and that surrogate can actually bypass the CFD solver, so that in the next time when you do the optimization, you just have a trial design, okay, and then you actually create a surrogate model in advance, and the optimizer will actually ask the surrogate model about the value. I'll showcase this to you in more detail when I show you the examples. Okay. So here is the comparison of surrogate models. So if you have a high fidelity method like a CFD tool, you can say that the dependent parameter y is equal to a function of the design variables x, and x is bold here, so that means x can be a vector. In a surrogate model, the approximate solution y cap or y hat is going to be a surrogate function f cap, which depends on x, the original design vector set, and alpha, which are some surrogate parameters. And this will be very, very closely equal to fx, though it may not be perfectly equal, but it will be roughly equal. So for example, you can see below an example that there is a function which is having a lot of waviness, and what you do is you calculate the function at some trial points where you calculate the high fidelity response. We call them as the training points, and then you fit a surrogate surface. And then what you can do is, if you want to minimize the function, you can actually minimize a surrogate function and get the solution without necessarily invoking CFD so many times. Okay, so this is what it is. Now, surrogate models can be classified into various types. Either you can have a black box method, or you can have a physics-based method. Now, we will not discuss today the physics-based methods because they are based on the problem physics, which will keep changing from problem to problem, and therefore we will not be able to use it generically for any situation. We will discuss today about the black box based surrogate models, where the problem is converted as or considered as a black box, and an input-output mapping is obtained by fitting a surrogate model. So there are several types of black box surrogate models. There are parametric models which estimate parameters directly for the finding responses. One example of that is the PRS. Okay, PRS is a very common parabolic response surface. And then there are non-parametric models. In a non-parametric model, we use local model and information to build an overall one. Two good examples of this are kriging, which we have used extensively, and I'll talk about that today. And the other is called as artificial neural networks, or ANNs. Now, you can also classify the methods as interpolation-based methods and regression methods. I will discuss that in the more detail in the next few slides. Okay. In the interpolation model, the model is constructed so that there is absolutely no error at the sample points. These are useful for numerical experiments like CFD or FEM, where the errors are deterministic in nature. Whereas regression models are more useful for physical experiments and noisy functions, in which the model is constructed by regressing the data available at other points. So there are different models available in literature. Each of them have their positives and negatives, and I'm going to talk about them very soon. Okay. So as I mentioned, the first type of surrogate models are parametric models, in which the surrogate parameters alpha are estimated using some initial training set TR, and TR is then not used for predicting the new design points. So y hat, which is an approximation of y, is basically a function of these parameters alpha. Two very prominent methods are the parabolic response surfaces and multivariate analytical recursive spline. These are also very commonly used. Then there are non-parametric models. In non-parametric models, you estimate the surrogate parameters alpha using the initial training set TR, but you continue to use that training set in predicting new design points. So therefore, the function y hat will depend not only on the surrogate parameters alpha, but also on TR. The common methods in this are the Kriging, artificial neural network, radial basis function, and support vector regression. These are the common ones which are used. Okay. Now there are some approaches for surrogate modeling. As I mentioned, there could be a regression approach. This is suitable for modeling physical experiments because those will have random errors. Okay. So here we use single function regresses for all the training points, and we normally fit a higher order polynomial, and then you add some kind of an epsilon error to take care of the random noise which is present in the experimental data. So PRS, MARS, ANN, SVM are examples of regression-based methods, but we also have interpolation-based methods where these are suitable for modeling computer experiment because the errors are deterministic in nature. Here we have a base function which is of a low order polynomial, or sometimes even a constant 1 degree polynomial, which is a base function that interpolates. And then you add, for local deviations, you add a function z, which depends upon the training set parameters. And then you add a constant error epsilon to take care of the variance. Examples of interpolation-based methods are Kriging and radial basis function. When we do surrogate modeling, we need to follow certain steps. The four major steps are generating the data, establishing the model structure selection, doing a parameter estimation, and then doing the validation of the model. Let us look at them one by one. The most important and the fundamental aspect of surrogate modeling is to generate the training set or TR. So how do you decide the size of TR? How many points are required? So that should be large enough to ensure accuracy of the model, but it should be small enough to allow computational efficiency. Obviously, larger the value of the training set, better will be the accuracy, but then you will spend much more time in calculating the function value at all the training points. So as the number of design variables NDV increases, its accuracy, the accuracy desired, and the nonlinearity of the function decreases. So the size that you need, the training set size will increase if you increase the number of design variables, increase the accuracy that you need, and if the function becomes more nonlinear. Now, how do you select? So what you do is, depending on the nature of the experiments, depending on the design space geometry, and depending on what your aim is, you can select a particular approach or a method. And then there are many techniques for filling up the point. The next important point is model structure selection. Which model to use? Do we use parametric or non-parametric? Do we use regression or do we use interpolation? So this comes with experience, and also it's a function of the type of the objective function that you are trying to fit. Okay, so it depends on what kind of approach you are following. Is your data coming from experiments or numerical simulations? Based on that, you can decide the model structure interaction. The last two steps are basically parameter estimation. So here we can use the standard mathematical tools like the maximum likelihood estimation to minimize the suitable error function epsilon. And then you need to do model validation to check the goodness of the fit. Okay, so there are many ways of doing it. You can look at the mean error, maximum error, summation of errors. You can look at the RMS error, etc., etc. It's now this is called as cross validation. So when you do cross validation, what you do is you take a part of the training of the entire data set is not touched and kept as test data, and the surrogate model is fitted using the training data, and then you test how it is working on the test data. What is the goodness of prediction on the test data? But then you keep on iterating it by changing the different sets. So every time you run, you partition the whole data into, in this case, there are 4 subsets. So you fit surrogate using 3 subsets and test on the 4th subset. And then the error that you obtain by all this is called as the cross-validation error. This is one of the most standard approaches in testing the surrogate-based design optimization. Here is an outline of SBDO, which we have used in our work. So first we define the problem in terms of design variables and responses, etc. Then we do a design of experiments through which we identify at what places, at how many points and at what points we need to get the actual data using the CFD. So we run the simulations at the sample point. Then using the objective function value at those sample points, we construct a surrogate model. Then we assess the quality of the fit. If the quality of the fit is okay, then it is great. If it is not okay, then we go back and go for more refinement. And then you can do design space refinement if you feel that your validation is not giving you good results. If you get good results in validation, no need to add more cycles, you can just stop. These are the steps in SBDO. So the first thing is, as I mentioned, problem definition. Then we do design of experiments. By design of experiments, I mean identifying the points in the design space which have to be sampled using the high fidelity CFD tools. So the criteria for a good design of experiment is space filling and local exploitation. That means you should explore the entire domain at reasonably distributed points. Okay. So there are many classical designs available for it. You have FFD, CCD, PFD, etc., etc. There are d-optimal designs. We use what is called as Latin hypercube sampling in fitting the desired, identifying the points at which we are going to do our fitting. This is an example of different types of classical designs. Okay, you can see that in a classical design, you will distribute that equally. In this case, we have shown a 2-variable solution. In a space filling design, you will notice that the distribution is more fulfilling along the entire domain. For example, in the bottom right, you will see that like Sudoku, you will find that all the points are such that you do not have, you have only one point in the horizontal and the vertical where that point is sampled. So this is called as design of experiments. The next step is to construct the surrogate model. So you have to pick from various surrogate techniques. You could also do a combination, or you could choose one based on your assessment of what is the best method. Then you estimate the parameters by the maximum likelihood estimation or minimizing the root mean square error. Then you assess the quality of the candidate by doing validation. And the most common way of doing that is cross-validation, which I've already discussed with you. After that, you go to optimization, which can be a basic unconstrained optimization using minimum of surrogates, but there are other ways also of doing it. Let's look for a quick comparison of various methods. Actually, it's not possible to do justice to this in such a short time. but I'll try to do whatever best I can. Now, I agree that these fonts are very small and you are not expected to really go through all of this and to understand it. This is basically a reference slide which you can keep with you for your future. Whenever you want to go back, you can check. So parabolic regression has its advantages and disadvantages. Then you have kriging, which is very much suitable for numerical experiments, which is what we have done. Okay. Then you have Rel basis function, which also give good results. But the computations can be highly expensive because of computation and memory. And then you have these multivariate regression. So there also there are accuracy is good, but it is not working for small training sets. And finally, we have artificial neural networks where large number of trial points are needed to get a good result. Otherwise, you will not get a very good match. So I'll just leave you with this. Only thing I want to do is I want to just tell you briefly that there are many tools available for doing SBDO online. These are some of the standard code which are available. And what we have done in our work is use a surrogate toolbox for MATLAB and Python, developed by Felipe Viana and made available free of cost as a MATLAB toolbox. So if you really want to start getting with surrogate optimization, I would sincerely recommend downloading the toolbox by Viana. There are very good helplines available in that, and you can then use it for your advantage. So first we tested surrogate model on test functions. So here is a 6-hump function, which consists basically of 6 humps. There are only 2 variables here, x1 and x2. But when you look at the function, you will find that there are 6 peaks in the function. This is called as camel 6-hump function. And you can see it's a fairly complicated function. So what we did is we located the points, the trial points or the design points as we call them, using Latin optimum hypercube sampling. And then we fitted a surrogate surface on that point. And you can see the surrogate model that we fitted and the one that you see on the left, which is the actual model, there is hardly any difference in the 2 shapes. So we were able to faithfully capture the complete functionality of the camel 6-hump function by fitting in the surrogate model at some design points. And then we tested our solution at some test points. Test points are points on the domain which are not used for making the training of the sets. They are used just for testing. So you see that the root mean square error reduces as the number of design points increases. We found that beyond 120, you actually don't start getting much improvement. The RMSE is going to reduce a lot when you have around 120 points in our problem. Okay. Now I want to proceed very quickly to the case studies. But before that, maybe it's a good time to take a few questions about the technique of surrogate based design optimization. If anybody in the audience has any queries, we can take those queries right now. Because from now on, I'm going to show you the application of this technique for our research work. So do you have any queries, friends, about surrogate based design optimization?
I don't know whether this question is relevant, but there is a question in the chat box. I am just reading it. As you share the good link for MATLAB, please suggest good link for LaTeX software also.
See, LaTeX software is basically only for document preparation.
Yeah.
Okay. It is not there for any numerical computation. So I don't know of any toolbox in LaTeX which can be useful for you for optimization or for surrogate based design. LaTeX is a language only for writing the document.
Yes, sir. So is there any more question? I think, sir, you can continue.
Okay. So just to show you the application of this particular approach, I will showcase to you 3 case studies. The first one of them is on aerosol optimization. This was done by Darshit Mehta, who was a dual degree student in my department around 10 years ago. and subsequently he has gone for his PhD. He got a direct PhD admission in optimization after working with me. So the aim of this particular work is to optimize the shape of the envelope of an aerostat with fins. Fins are the stabilizing surfaces using a suitable optimizing function, which was the aerodynamic drag in this case. The motivation was that before him, there was a student who worked on surrogate-based modeling for only the envelope shape optimization. But there were some issues in that. He used a standard toolbox called DACE. Okay, but there were some issues in that, and this particular study was to remove it. So what is the methodology we followed? So what we did first is we parameterized the shape of an aerostat envelope with certain constraints. Then we identified the trial points at which we have to use CFD for calculating the drag coefficient. We fitted the surrogates and checked the accuracy of each of them. So here we looked at a study of around 21 different types of surrogate models, construct the objective function for each of them and optimize it, and then we identified which of them is the best solution. So to parameterize the shape of the envelope, this is the approach we used, which was given earlier by an MTech student called Tushar Kanikdale in the year 2004 as part of his MTech project. So the shape of the envelope is parameterized in terms of these 7 parameters: x1, y1, x2, y2, x3, y3, and L. And for a fixed volume of the airship, we gave some constraints of the slope continuity at various points. And with that, we were able to reduce the whole problem. And then 60 training shapes were generated using optimum Latin hypercube sampling. And we noticed that the minimum and the maximum value of the parameters x1, x2, y1, y2, y4 are, these are the parameters. These were used, there you can see the list of parameters given there. Okay. So now what we did is we looked at a standard operating condition for an aerostat, low Mach number of 0.15, low operating ambient pressure. And because it is a bluff body, we have used a turbulent Spallard-Aramas model. And we did not look for multiple angle of attacks. We did the study only for zero angle of attack because that allows us to go for half symmetry in the CFD, and that saves time. So here is a picture showing how the grid was generated. You can notice that a large grid was generated around the body, and nearer to the body, the grid is very, very finely coarsely located. And as we go away from the body, it becomes more relaxed. So on the bottom left, we see the static pressure distribution. And on the right hand side, we see the boundary layer visualization of this particular shape or multiple shapes. The next thing were, we tested 3 methods, RBF, PRS, and kriging. So we found that, and also what my student did is that he actually looked at several methods and several kriging approaches, and then he developed something called as the best kriging, which is an average or the mean of all of them. So you can notice here that the lowest CV error, cross validation error, has come in the best kriging, only of 0.0101. Okay. So the kriging parameters are mentioned here. I don't want to get into the details. There are many types of parameters that are used. So we noticed that initial solution, the CD was 0.0257, and there were some design parameters. But this 0.0257 reduces to 0.0194 with best kriging. That much improvement you can get in the solution by choosing the correct. Another important thing to be kept in mind is how much time is taken in each step. So shape generation takes very little time, can't even count it. Meshing takes around 30% of the time. Then 56% is taken by the CFD code to evaluate. So together, the meshing and the aerodynamic flow solving takes something like 86% of the time. Surrogate fitting takes only 1 minute, 1% of the time. And then we have the optimization. So you can see that The maximum time is spent in the meshing and in the aerodynamic evaluation, and comparatively lesser time is spent in other activities. Now I'm just going to show you the results. So you can see now there are so many shapes. The blue colored things are the initial shapes in the top left figure, and the green colored shapes are the shapes which have been entered by the optimizer to try out. And finally, there are some optimum shapes in black color, which is not so clear here, but it will be clear in the next slide. Okay, on the right hand side, you can see the spread of the data and how the value of CD changes. This is the optimum shape that we obtained using this methodology. And here are some pictures of the fluent analysis with the fin of this particular envelope. So the key conclusions of this particular work was that we were able to find a low drag shape using surrogates and 2D axisymmetric flow solver. As expected, the body that we found optimum was slender, and the best part is that with only 72 calls to the main function, they were able to do the optimization. And SBDO saved a lot of time. Otherwise, there may be more than 2,000, 3,000 calls. But only using 72 calls, we were able to get a good solution. The output of this particular work appeared as a paper, which was presented in 2013 in an AIAA LTA conference. I'll be happy to share this paper with anybody who is interested to get an idea, because it may not be freely available. You may have to spend money to procure it, but we will be happy to share it with you. Okay. Moving on to the next case study number 2. Now we go for surrogate-based optimization of airship envelopes. From aerostats, we move to airships. This was done by Muhammad Irfan Alam, a PhD scholar in IIT Bombay. Interestingly, Irfan was an alumnus of AMU. He did his undergraduate degree in 2011, or yeah, he passed out from mechanical department of AMU. And after doing a postdoc in Korea, now Irfan is an assistant professor in the Department of Aerospace Engineering at VIT Bhopal. So this particular work which I'm going to show you is part of his PhD research work. This I've already told you. So there are some standard envelope profiles which are available in literature. The one which is most commonly used in India was given by Professor GNV Rao of IISc Bangalore, who is unfortunately no more right now. So in his respect, that shape is called as a GNVR profile. This profile, the best part is that it can be completely and mathematically accurately represented in the term of 3 equations. And there is a maximum diameter point. Up to that point, it is a equation of an ellipse. And then on the rear side, from 2.875 times diameter to 3.05 times diameter, it's a parabola. And in between the two, it is an arc of a circle. But the numbers have been such chosen that there is a perfect continuity at the various points, because of which this particular shape is a very nice, neat shape. Most of the aerostats built by ADRD Agra are of the GNVR profile. Okay. Now, the other profile which is very common is the NPL profile. Nothing but a combination of 2 ellipses with the ratio of the semi-major and semi-minor axis, semi-major axis of the 2 ellipses as √2. Okay. So the semi-major axis of the front portion is A, and that of the rear portion is √2 times A. Otherwise, both of them are very simple parabolic shapes. This was given by the National Physical Laboratory of UK. And again, it's a very common shape for airship envelopes worldwide. Then from China, there is a researcher called Wong, who has given a profile. And that profile is in the function of certain constant parameters A, B, C, D. Giving the numerical value of these parameters, you can calculate the profile at any point. And finally, the Chinese have built a small trial airship called as the Xian 1. And for that also they have their own profile. Okay, so what we did is we looked at existing literature on the shape optimization of streamlined bodies of revolution for submarines and for other applications. And using that approach, we generated the envelope shape using a basic polynomial equation. So y square is equal to a1x plus a2x square, etc., up to anxn is an nth order polynomial with n constants, which can be used to describe any particular shape. So from the polynomial value, one can easily get that the value of the second derivative, the value of y square at 0 would be 0, and at 1 would be just all the parameters, and y square at n will be a1, m, etc. So on the bottom, you can see you have R0 and R1, the two radii. You have D and L, which are the max diameter and the length, and you have this parameter M, which is the location of the maximum diameter. For an airship envelope of length L given, you can actually calculate it, right? Then, because it is an envelope which is basically going to have a continuity, you can bring in some curvature conditions as additional constraints. And with that, you can actually solve. So this is our envelope shape generator, and there is one more parameter called as the prismatic coefficient Cp, which is equal to the ratio of the volume of the envelope to the volume of a cylinder, which has a length equal to maximum length and dia equal to maximum diameter. So how much away from a cylindrical shape you are, that is measured by the prismatic coefficient. So finally, we have a sixth order polynomial, and A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6 can be determined for a particular shape using simple formulation. Now the question that comes to the mind is that why have we chosen this particular shape generator? Because this particular shape generator is a very simple one. And then what we did is we actually tested it out for some standard shapes like NPL and Bond. So friends, you are probably seeing only one red colored line, but actually if you actually zoom into it, you will see that there are two lines. There is a red line and then there is a blue line, but they are so much overlapping that there is hardly any error that can be observed in the figures. Similarly, if you notice here also we see only one line, but actually there are two lines with a perfect superposition. So the Gertler coefficients are so advantageous that they can actually parameterize any shape which can be thought by you as a shape suitable for an aerostat. That's why we used the Gertler shape optimization. This is the meshing that we used for calculating the CD. This is a two-dimensional CD analysis, friends, to save time. You can see how the mesh is finely graded near the surface to capture the effects of boundary layer. For validation, we used a cross-validation tool. Okay, so first you calculate at a high Reynolds number, low Reynolds number, the values of V, T, P, and Q, and then you calculate the values of V, of T, P, and rho at higher altitude. And using this information, you can actually get the CP chart, and then you can see that the difference between the present study and the actual one is hardly any difference. Almost the same. Okay, let's move on to surrogate modeling per se now. So this I have already shown you. In our analysis, we used genetic algorithm for optimization. So we input some parameters, we input the geometry, and normally we would have gone to CFD to get the value of drag, give it to genetic algorithms. It would change design variables, it would modify the geometry, send it back to GA. GA would again change randomly or with some scheme some of the coordinates and ask you to evaluate again. The cycle will go on. But no, we are not happy with this cycle. We wanted to ensure that a person actually stays at home only. So we come up with a simple method that what you do is you replace the surrogate analysis by a surrogate model. And after that, you forget about the CFD model. Whenever you create geometry of a new shape, just send it to the surrogate model to get the value of CD, and then invoke an optimization technique like genetic algorithms to calculate which is the best shape. So the physical model is the one that calculates CD based on experimental data or some other approach. A numerical model is a simulation model, and then a surrogate model is a model of a model, which is superset of the numerical model and the physical model. Going further, so what we do is you first set the problem, decide the objective function, decide the design variables. Then you set design state selection. That means you bound the X and the Y variables if it is bounded by a suitable limit. The third thing is design of experiments. So now you have a design space which is already frozen, well defined, well bounded. Now you need to find out what happens at this particular point. Then if you're given the go ahead, you create trial points using OLHS and then carry out the CFD analysis at those trial points. Using the information so generated, you construct a surrogate model. Once you have a surrogate model, you just check whether it is sufficiently accurate. If the answer is no, not accurate, now you can go back to the person or the people who come after the person and sort out the problem. Okay, if it is found to be accurate, then you can just go forward with the optimization and get your solution. Now, as I mentioned to you, the quality of the surrogate is decided by how well it performs in cross validation. So you can see that we did our studies for two Reynolds number, low and high Reynolds number, and we found that prediction of the results by CFD. You can see the numbers there for all the shapes, and getting the same solution using CFD, you can see that the errors are all of them are less than around 1.2%. Similarly, we did a study for high Reynolds number for high altitude airship, and we found that errors are very, very small, 0.5% to 0.6% maximum for one particular case. So this proves the efficacy of our surrogate bit optimization. You can see the various shapes, and you can then decide which one of them is the optimum shape. And for higher Reynolds number, because we invoke the length constraint also, all the shapes are actually merging onto each other. So you can see that the optimum shape has got the value of CD slightly far behind, or just at the quarter part. These are the design variable values. So we found that there is an improvement of around 8.6% in the optimum solution. Okay. So these are the important parameters that were obtained. So kindly have a look at them. So if you see the fitness ratio is 1.0, these are all. We don't bother about it. But other three shapes have almost 3.9, 3.2, 3.3. And they matched very well with also our optimum results. Okay. I also asked them to look at other parameters like spheres, and they repeated the experiment and they found that the results are very, very transferable. Here is the CFD analysis of the baseline GNVR shape without the fins in this case. And this is the optimum shape. Now, I don't see much difference physically, okay, except the rate of change is smoother in the case of the first application compared to the rate of change. But apart from that, you can see that there is hardly any difference. Now, if you look at the low Reynolds number, high Reynolds number, you will notice that here also, unfortunately, the table units are not the same. So the same color should not be used. But here we observe that the rear and the front wing is not playing a role. Is not the project for you. This particular work appeared again as a paper in next AAA conference held in Denver in 2017. Okay. And now I want to present to you the last case study done by my current student by the name Manikandan M. Manikandan M is a PhD student who is about to finish now. We are hopeful that by end of this year he will finish his PhD. And he is an assistant professor senior grade at MIT Manipal in the Department of Aeronautical and Automobile Engineering. So now what Manikandan has done is he has gone beyond Irfan's work. Irfan worked on a single lobed envelope, but modern airships all have multiple lobes because that gives a better aerodynamic performance, because for a given volume it will give you flatter envelope, and that will be better for mounting the solar cells. So here what we have done is the original 5 parameters XM, RO, R1, CP, L by D for a single lobed envelope, which we have discussed, they are retained. And then you introduce 2 functions: fraction of distance between the lobes laterally and the fraction of distance between the lobes vertically. So these 2 parameters or 2 ratios are added, F and G. And with that, now we are looking at optimization of multi-lobed envelopes for hybrid airships. So again, some lower and upper bounds were given to all the variables on the basis of past experience and literature survey. You can see that the items on there are 2 design variables. There are many design variables. We have just shown you the way we have done the testing for 2 of them. There are 9 design variables actually. So you can see that in the entire domain, blue colored points are the testing data. So in the domain from 0.3 to 0.6, you can see that the number of samples is increased. So in this case, we are looking at the number of samples that are there. Right. The same humpback camel function which Irfan had used, it was separately optimized, and we found that the surrogate model is also working very well here. This is another very challenging test function called as a restringent function, where you can see there are multiple peaks, all of them in the vicinity. So one of them is the local peak, one of them is the global peak, others are local minima. But interestingly, the genetic algorithms and other tools are able to actually even penetrate such functions and go to the optimum solution. If you look at the error analysis, you will find that at the peaks of -1 and -2, etc., there were high errors reported, but at all other points, the errors were actually very, very small in magnitude. And the same is true for the restringent function also. This is the optimum solution obtained for the shape of a tri-lobed airship, which inshallah you will see being taken up seriously by the government of India, because there is a serious attempt by government of India to go into the development of stratospheric airships. So this is going to be one of the candidates that they will take up. After that, what we did is we actually coupled this entire geometrical shape optimization problem to other modules which came directly from the ADE results on our ongoing projects. So those results have been incorporated, and later on you will find that the thesis by a student is going to contain not only the shape optimization but also the aircraft design optimization. So you can notice that optimum shape changes as a function of various constraints and various seasons. Okay. So we noticed that between the baseline case and the optimal case, there were huge improvements in almost all the important parameters. Okay. So that means the surrogate-based model optimization has resulted in a much better shape compared to the baseline. In our case here, we have used Kriging-based surrogate model. We have checked for the efficiency by cross-validation. We found that only about ±3% error is there compared to the CFD data, which is acceptable. And with this, we were able to do the design of a high altitude long endurance hybrid airship. This particular work has appeared as a journal paper recently in Aerospace Science and Technologies, again, which I'll be happy to share with you. So I would like to conclude by saying what we are doing right now. So right now, we are trying to apply certain techniques of AI and ML to go for shape optimization. There is a current student who is working, he's an expert in AI and ML techniques, and he's going to look at the data that we already have generated and see if he can get better results than the 3% error which is shown here. So with this, I have come to the end of my presentation. I'm sorry, I had to give you an overview of LTS systems first, because without that, you would not have really appreciated or understood what we are going to do and how we are doing it. Okay. So now I'm open to any question if anybody has. I have stopped my presentation and I would like you to, I would like you to ask any question that you may have. I'm getting a comment from Professor Jyoti Sinha saying they're very much interested, and she says she's a mathematician and she would like to collaborate. So most welcome. We would be very happy to collaborate.
So dear participants, if you have got any query or any of us, we have seen any ambition of working with Professor Pant, you can right now collaborate. It's a open platform. And thank you, sir. As we live in the world of motion, and every movement that we make interacts with the fluid. So therefore, CFD becomes that important for any calculation or modeling. And introducing it for surrogate model. So my question was, in tracking of that maximum power point in case of solar panel, so it's let's shift from the topic we are talking. Does the surrogate models help there also? So I'm sorry, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Am I audible
Yes.
or not?
Yes, sir.
So I was saying that in our study, we have used the surrogate model only for optimizing the shape of the envelope. Subsequently, we are using other methods to do the design and optimization of the location of the solar array. As you must have seen in one of my results, for certain applications, the array is good in the front, for some in the middle, for some in the back. That depends upon the season, that depends upon the location, and also on the solar irradiance available.
Yes.
So the answer is we have not used surrogate-based optimization for solar array optimization.
So there is one more question. What is the motivation and what are you trying to achieve by applying AI and ML in your work?
That's a very good question. I am interested to see if AI and ML techniques, which are known to be able to go something like deep learning techniques, which are actually able to capture the interrelations or interaction between the variables. Our aim is, are we going to get a better solution using some AI/ML technique for the surrogate fitting? Because Kriging has given us up to plus minus 3%. So my aim is, can we bring it down to 1% error without actually doing more CFD evaluations? So what the challenge I have done is, I've given the same data set to the expert on AI and ML, and I've asked that person, can you use this information and give me a better fit so that my prediction for the newer shapes is better than 3%. And our aim is 1%. Or lower.
But sir, for these techniques, especially for deep learning, we really need a large data set. So do you have that much of data?
Correct. That's a very good question. The general perception about AI and ML is that you need very large data set for us to be able to draw any conclusions. But that is true when you want to use the information to predict about something in the future. Here, we are not interested in predicting something for the future. Here, we are interested in capturing the interrelations between various variables So I have the presentation with me, but I don't think we have the time to go into that because I wanted to limit it to only 1.5 hours. And that's why I decided not to include that. And also that is work in progress. So in near future, when we achieve some progress, we should be able to share with you in some other FDP or in some other manner, maybe through a conference. So that's a work in progress right now. But the aim is, can we use the same number of data sets as a Kriging, but get a better correlation? And I think it is promising.
So that's all for the question answer session now. Thank you, sir, for such a nice lecture. It was such a nice blend of classical and deeply technical session where we have seen a small clipping of video of the aerostats and airships. And then for the researchers, there were a lot of technical aspects were also there. So it was every participant, I think, have got a noteworthy takeaway point from here. For all my participants, I want to give an information, special information regarding Professor Pant, sir, that he is, if I'm not wrong, sir, you are junior. Kalpana Chawla was senior to you in your college?
That's right. Kalpana Chawla was 2 years senior to me when I was an undergraduate student. And I had the great pleasure of working with her on many departmental seminars. She was the president and I was the secretary of the Departmental Aero and Astro Society. So we have worked together and planned so many seminars like this and presentations. So yes, what the information you have is correct. One more thing I want to tell you, I have actually shared my email address with everybody in the list of attendees. This is especially for Professor Jyoti Sinha, who has expressed her desire to associate with me. I don't have her email address, but I'm sharing my address so that she can write to me. And also anybody else in the audience who would like me to talk about LTA systems, design, optimization, I'll be very happy to do that. And I would like to collaborate with anybody who wants to take this work further.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for, standing offer to all our participants that you're offering. And I also extend my thanks for your offer for sharing your paper, which is otherwise paid version. So thank you so much.
I'll be happy to share. There are 3-4 papers related to surrogate bit optimization. We will be happy to share all of them.
So thank you so much. Thank you all the participants for being patient. And I'm sure that it was a great session. Thank you, Professor Pant. Over to Imran, sir.
Thank you. I think there is no audio.
Sorry for that, sir.
Yeah.
With this, we have come to the end of day 3 of this FDP. I have already shared PowerPoint presentations of day 1 and day 2 with the participants, and I will share the presentations of day 3 as well as soon as I will get them from the resource person. So we will meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. And once again, I thank Professor R.K. Pant for sparing some time from his busy schedule and just for this great lecture on this exciting area. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for inviting me, sir. Thanks a lot. I would like to visit AMU personally whenever the opportunity arises. It's in one of my bucket lists to visit Aligarh.
Most welcome, sir.
Inshallah, we'll meet soon.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.